you to those who watched, liked, subscribed, and commented on my last video. I really appreciate hearing from you and seeing how you engage with my content. Today is Saturday. It is raining outside for me, but yesterday was Friday. It was International Women's Day. I took that day off. I did not know that it was International Women's Day. March, if you don't know, is Women History Month. So this is a great time to celebrate the women in our lives and women in the world. So honestly, every day is a day to celebrate the women in our lives and the women in the world. So I'm going to use today's video to celebrate women in history and then women in my own life that I want to give flowers to. But first, I teach, but I'm not a teacher. I instruct, but I'm not an instructor. I profess, but I'm not a professor. In this season, I'm being very, very careful with my I am statements. I am present. So many of you are probably asking yourself, why am I starting off with Eve? Why not? Why not? Right? She is the first woman in the world, as Adam is the first man in the world. So I want to thank her for being the first. Many of you don't know this, but there's a famous actress. Her name is Lupita Nyong'o. I think she is Kenyan and Mexican. She did a DNA test in which she found out that Eve is her great-great-great-grandmother. So in fact, the first woman in the world was black. And so Eve, first woman in the world, did not have any other women to counsel her, to talk to her. And she was going through stuff with Adam or just going through stuff in the world. She had God to talk to. And that's extremely important. And many of you would say more valuable than having other women. But I do want to recognize that she was the first. And there were no other women here for her to, there was no outreach group. So I want to thank her for her contributions to humanity. Many people, when they talk about Eve, they always talk about the mistake that she made. I'm not here to judge, because that's not my job. I'm here to say thank you and give her flowers. The second woman I want to give my flowers to is Harriet Tubman. I nicknamed her Harriet Moses Tubman because as Moses led the Hebrews out of Egypt into freedom, Harriet Moses Tubman led enslaved people through the Underground Railroad into freedom. And so I want to thank her for her contributions. She had help. There was a tribe and a village. There were abolitionists. There were people who agreed with her mission and made it their mission to assist her. So all of the female or woman abolitionists during that time, I definitely want to thank you for what you've done to help all the women in the world who look like me to gain our freedom. That's very important, and definitely just huge shout out to Harriet Moses Tubman. Thank you very much for that. We can never repay you for that. Hopefully, yeah, we can never repay you for that. Never. We can never repay you for that. Next person I want to talk about is my grandmother. My grandmother was an amazing woman, a force of nature, very dark-skinned woman, long jet black hair. She's an Indian, but definitely a black woman. When growing up as a kid, I literally thought she was magical. She was the first person I would see in the morning and the last person I saw at night. I don't think I ever saw my grandmother sleep. What I did see her do was love, give, smile, prepare, organize. She was respectful. She was reliable. She was accountable. She was credible. She was a missionary. She sang in the church choir. Just an amazing woman. And she raised my aunts and uncles to be a force of nature as well. All of my aunts and uncles know how to cook. I mean, skillets on the stove, cook, clean, sew by hand, sew by machine, and they had their hands in raising other human beings. The oldest children help raise the younger children, help bring them into the legacy of love that my grandparents had started. My grandmother, my fondest memories of my grandmother is when she's cooking. And I'll tell you why. I was the kind of child that, excuse me, if you were cooking, then I was cleaning. And I used to do it with my mom as well. So my grandmother was in the kitchen being magical with the dash of salt, dash of pepper, oil, water, herbs, other herbs and spices. My grandmother never used a measuring cup. Like she just would just, you remember Mrs. Dash? Like, the spice. My grandmother was always dashing things into a pot, stirring things, and she just knew, this needs a little bit more salt. This needs a little bit more pepper. I loved her energy in the kitchen. I loved seeing her knead the dough with her hands. She used to make the most amazing buttermilk biscuits. She used to make these trays of them. And my cousin Brian would come in and just take a tray, get some honey, and sit down and would eat the whole thing. My grandmother's food was so good that it never lasted long. She always had to cook. There were times when we had so much food in grandma's house, it just made no sense. She would always send stuff out for other people, but then those people would always send food in for her. The house was so blessed. It's more blessed to give than to receive. It's more blessed to give, blessed to give. It's more blessed to give than to receive. But man, did we always have food. We always had food. And one of our favorite fruits were watermelon. I did a short on yellow watermelon. Please go check that out. And I did that in remembrance of my grandmother. See, our watermelons here in this country, in your country, especially the country, if you're in the United States, it's red. You guys have probably never seen a yellow watermelon. When I started traveling the world, I started seeing yellow watermelon. And then I watched a video where I was told that it originated from Africa. And it is much juicier and sweeter than the red one. But we always grew up with the red ones. My grandmother always had them up under her bed. She had a couple in the refrigerator that cold, but if they were in there, they didn't stay there very long because, back in the day when I was growing up, the South would be very hot. In this country, it can get to 125 degrees in the summer, literally. So certain parts of South Carolina, but the South in general, it gets pretty hot. When I was older, when I was younger, the funniest thing is, when you're younger, you think it's really hot until you start traveling and living in the desert. You're like, that was nothing. And so another thing, my fondest memory of her was on the rocking chair. If you're from the South, the rocking chairs on the porch. We also had a swing. I used to swing with my grandmother. We used to sit on the swing and just swing together. My grandmother was such an amazing person that she just understood me perfectly. I never had to explain myself. I never had to feel weird or different. She just accepted me. There was no such thing as explain yourself to me. Never had to explain myself. She just accepted me for who I was. And I really enjoyed that. And I miss that now that I'm older because I don't come in contact with enough women that just accept me as I am and for who I am. And that bothers me to a certain degree, not being accepted. However, I do accept myself. And my grandmother accepting me was the most amazing thing because she's the matriarch. It wasn't like she never criticized me either. My grandmother was very grateful for myself and my other siblings because we were raised the way she had raised my mother, to be respectful, accountable, organized, clean, credible, trustworthy, resilient, These are the things that I just remember about her. My grandmother was a woman